College is more than a place. It's a journey. Welcome to the Two Night Show, where we explore the moments and ideas that shape us and the impact we make through conversations with Green Knights and other inspiring voices. How do Hallmark movies, social media, and other forms of media shape our view of love? On this episode, S&C professor Dr. Valerie Kretz joins us to explore how media influences romance, relationships, and even breakups in today's world. All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Valerie Kretz, for being here with us today. Your students know you as Dr. Your colleagues know you as Valerie, so we'll go with Valerie for now. You have a lot of experience, like we said in the intro, with research into mass media and the impact that it has on us. Today we're focusing on romantic relationships, but I want to know a little bit about your history, because a lot of students just know you as, okay, you're here, you're on campus, you're a faculty member, but how did you get to where you are today? What's the story behind before you got your doctorate?
Sure. So I was actually a first-generation college student, and I took a really non-traditional path through the academy. So I was working full-time all the way through my undergraduate degree and through my master's degree as well. So I was really only a part-time student all the way through all of those years. And then I got my graduate degree at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. So that was the first time I was actually a full-time student. I had quit my job in marketing. I was a director of marketing at that time and moved from that into higher education. So it was a really interesting path in that many work not until after they graduate. I was working all of that time and really going to school largely at night for a lot of years. So a kind of different path, but it got me to where I am today. So
what was the main driver behind you lived in the marketing world, and why did you choose, okay, I want to teach this. I want to research more into this.
Yeah, absolutely. So my undergrad degree was in communication, and I was always passionate about communication, but along the way, I had taken a ton of English classes, and it was really because there was a professor that I just thought was fantastic, and he was so engaging, and I ended up taking so many of his classes that I ended up with an English degree kind of on accident. And so I had him so many times. And then in my, believe it was senior year, I took a course with him that had a presentation component. And every class I had taken up to that time was always papers. And so I had written a ton of papers for him, but never a presentation. And I did this presentation, and being a communications student, I was pretty adept at it, I'd like to think, for an undergraduate at that time. And I was really excited about it, and I gave that presentation. And when I got the feedback on that assignment, at the top, the professor had written, "This was really great. Have you ever thought about teaching?" And that for me was just a light bulb moment. I had never thought about teaching. I had just been working in marketing and plugging along, and I thought that was the piece of communication that I was most interested in. But once I really started, feeling like that was the path, I started looking into what would it take to ultimately be a college professor, and learning that it takes a master's degree and a PhD and going through all of that. And so ultimately that was the aim, like from that day on. It was really just this, I feel called to do this. And so eventually the time was right to quit the day job and go to graduate school to get my PhD and then move on from there.
So now you're at St. Norbert. What sparked your interest in coming to a private liberal arts college?
Absolutely. So the biggest thing that drew me to St. Norbert College was Communio. I came here for the interview, and, they tell you about that. You read about that online in advance and what the mission of the college is. And I really liked that conceptually. But then when I was here on campus, I felt it. I felt that community here on campus, and that really appealed to me. And so I came to St. Norbert College really because of the mission. That was what drew me the most. Obviously, I have a subject matter that I wanted to teach, and there was an opening in that area. But the reason why I wanted to do that here was really because of the mission of the college. In addition to that, my experience in grad school, I had taught a large lecture class, 150 students in an introductory type communication course. And I knew that was not the experience that I wanted moving forward. I really wanted smaller classes, getting to know my students, and really forming those bonds and those relationships. And I knew that that was what St. Norbert College was all about. And so I saw right away that this was going to be a really good fit for me.
And you've been here now for almost 10 years?
10 years.
Wow. That went by fast.
It did.
Okay, so you've had so many publications since you started doing research. We could touch on a couple others if you like, but the one that we're going to focus on today mainly is your new book. Pull it up here, Romantic Relationships and Media. So there's obviously, like, you can look up summaries online, but I'd love to hear your Cliff Notes version, and then we'll dive deeper.
Sure. So romantic relationships and media is about the intersections of those two topics, romantic relationships and media. And the media part of that I treat very broadly. And that's really what makes this book different from many of the other books that you might read on this topic. I'm looking at media in the broadest possible sense, which means it covers everything from social media and texting and digitally mediated communication channels to television and movies and video games and music. I really wanted to cover everything possible in one book. And so that's what makes it stand apart. But that's then really the focus is the research that has been done on all of the topics within those two spaces, romantic relationships, media, where they connect. And so that's really what the book is all about. It's about covering in a preliminary sort of way all of the theories, all of the research studies that have been conducted, but then also bringing those alive through real world experiences. So as a part of the book, I interviewed a number of folks. Some were single, some were in long-term relationships, a variety of ages, and a variety of lived experiences, and talked to them about their experiences with romantic relationships and media, and use that material then to provide an example for many of the theories and research findings that are within the book. And not only in terms of providing examples of what we already know, but then too kind of pointing to directions for here's maybe what we don't know. A participant might bring up a circumstance that researchers haven't really looked at yet. And so sort of pointing to those as well is like, these are areas that future studies should take a look at. So that's really the premise of the book.
What was your inspiration behind this topic?
So the topic in general is something that has been really interesting to me all the way since grad school. And I can even point to a particular example. So when I was in grad school, the movie Twilight was becoming really popular. And I was in a class that was focused on youth and media. And we covered all kinds of things, everything from violence to advertising, the whole kind of topic. But the thing that really piqued my interest at the time was I saw this news article that said, teens biting each other because of Twilight. Oh. And I thought, okay, that is a media effect someone should be looking at, right? That like somehow this film about vampires is inspiring these teens to execute on that. Oh, and obviously the article was about health concerns and all of those sorts of things. And so even though that seems like a silly sort of example, it really got me thinking, okay, young people are exposed to a lot of material about romantic relationships, and what those relationships look like could really have an influence on young people. And so that really piqued my interest on this topic. I've been researching it now for more than a decade, have, as you said, accumulated a lot of studies, and really then bringing all of that and much, much more together in the book project. So yeah, that's really what brought me there in the first place.
So when you said Twilight, I first pictured, how old was I? Maybe 13-year-old Morgan sitting on her bed reading, was it New Moon. Is that what the second one is? Crying because Edward left Bella. That's what I thought you were going to talk about, like the relationship part of it. But the fact that people were literally influenced to go bite each other. Okay.
It's a very unique effect.
And people don't realize that these stories can have that kind of effect on each other either.
They absolutely can. And in fact, a project that I'm working on now that is just in the preliminary stages, so clearly not published yet, is about particularly memorable experiences with romance in media. And I've been thinking about this a lot lately, along with a colleague that I regularly publish with. The fact that, yes, the accumulation of media exposure over time can absolutely have an impact, right? So over a lifetime, we see a ton of media, whether that's TV or movies or what have you, and that can have a cumulative effect. But what about that circumstance? What about the circumstance where you're reading a book and it's so poignant that I'm going to pull the word imprints on you. That's a Twilight reference for those who are not familiar. What if it has that impact, right? And it isn't about just everything you've seen, but it's about that one thing that you've seen that just hits hard or hits at the right moment or teaches you some sort of really important to you lesson. Mm-hmm. And so the research that we're working on right now is about getting those experiences on paper. And so really having participants think about that, think about their experiences. Have they had that kind of experience? If so, with what? What kinds of impacts does it have?
What is your research shown? Why do people cling so tightly to romantic stories?
That is an excellent question. It's something that I've looked at quite a bit at this point. Why romance, right? Yeah. Because you have so many options today. Mm-hmm. You can stream just anything, right? So why do we gravitate towards these sorts of stories? And it really comes down to, it's all about the love. People love love. And the thing that appeals about the romance genre for so many folks is that happy ending. Mm-hmm. It's that coming together, big romantic gesture, the thing that is, I call warm, right? It's warm media. It makes you feel warm inside. And I've made this comparison on occasion with Hallmark Christmas movies is something that I've taken a look at. Hallmark movies in general, but Christmas movies are the really prominent ones, right? And that Hallmark Christmas movies are like a warm cup of hot cocoa, that just like the people who are in these scenes where I'm sure no real snow exists and they're just like holding that cup and warming themselves, that watching those films, that is what it's like. It's comforting. You know what to expect. There's no surprises in a Hallmark movie. Nope. Like, you know what the end's going to be before it happens. And so there's a comfort in knowing that. There's a predictability. And that formula, even though people make fun of it as like lesser than because it's so formulaic, there's an upside to that, which is that you can watch and not worry. There's no uncertainty. There's no surprises. And it's just then in the end, everything comes together and we're happy and there's love and it's warm. And so I really think that parallel makes a lot of sense. And that's why people watch those movies. Mm-hmm. It's the same reason people watch romantic comedies and things of that nature. People love love. And personally, I think that that's a great thing.
So then why are movies or TV shows that don't end the way that we think they're going to end? Maybe someone passes away, maybe someone breaks up and that's just the end. Why are we so still attached to those stories?
I would suggest that actually people are not attached to those stories. You may be able to come up with an example, like a prominent example of like, oh, this particular movie that people like. But I'll even give you an example. There's a movie called The Breakup. Featuring
very popular.
Yes, and it was a popular movie, but I tell you what, people hated that movie.
Yeah.
And they watched it, but a study was done talking to people about their experiences with romantic comedies and why do you watch these and all of that. It wasn't my study, it was someone else's, but the interview participants regularly brought up that movie as like, I do not like this. This is not the thing that I'm looking for out of this genre. So part of my answer would be, I don't think people do like that, particularly not out of the rom-com genre.
Okay.
Now, if you're talking about a different genre, so like romantic dramas, and I think of like a classic like The Notebook, right? In the end, it's sad and it's poignant because they die in the end of that movie. Sorry, spoiler. It's like 20 years old. It's been a long time. Yeah. But they die in each other's arms and there's still love. So the thing that people really are looking for, which is that romantic, big, happy ending, it is a happy ending. It's a sad ending.
Right.
But it's a happy ending.
Sure.
And so I think it's the same thing still applies, that even in those sorts of films that have those more kind of poignant endings, people still like those for the same reasons, just in a slightly different fashion.
So I've seen you mention parasocial breakups. Can you explain what that is? And then explain why we get so attached to characters and then, in a way, mourn them.
Sure. So parasocial breakup is built upon the concept of parasocial relationship. And parasocial relationship simply refers to the bonds that we form with media figures. Now, those could be fictional characters. Those could be real people, celebrities, reality stars. Those could be athletes, could be really anyone who's in media.
Okay.
The sort of hallmark of it is that it's generally one-sided, right? Like you feel an attachment to them, they do not have an attachment to you, right? Now, of course, there's social media and things that allow us to interact with those folks in ways that we didn't previously, but nonetheless, they're generally one-sided. And people really form attachments and strong bonds with some of these characters. And in fact, I'll just reference back to Twilight. Was a lot of research around that movie, and not just teenagers. There was a whole phenomenon known as Twilight moms, who were adult women who were super invested in this story and its outcomes and the relationships in that film.
I didn't know that.
It's true. I didn't write that study, but it was studied. So ultimately, I think of these bonds as a natural extension of our want to connect. We all have that, right? It's a basic, fundamental human need to connect with others. And when we're watching something unfold on television or in a movie or someone's life, just on a reality show or even just on social media through Reels or TikToks or whatever that is, we connect with them.
Yes.
And in a lot of ways, it just mimics those same relationships we have in the real world. And they exist on a continuum in the same way that all of our relationships do. You have acquaintances, you have friends, you have best friends, right? And the same is true of parasocial bonds. There are some that you're familiar with, media figures, some that you feel close to, some that you feel very close to, and even some you might feel romantically inclined toward, having those crushes. And research would suggest that that can happen at any stage of life too, even though we tend to think of like the teen girl who has the crush on like the boy band singer or whatever.
The Taylor Swift music video.
Yes, those are kind of our like stereotypical parasocial romances, but they can exist throughout your life. So ultimately, again, I think this is just an extension of how we normally relate. And so parasocial breakups occur when either that person passes or the character is written off the show, or in some way we no longer have access. And this was a concept that really came about around the time that Friends went off the air. So people had been watching that show for so many years and were so invested in those characters, but ultimately then it ends, right? And so what is the feeling that you have when that happens? And it's loss.
Yeah.
It's loss in the same way if you lost a friend or broke up with a romantic partner or someone passed away in your life. Now, obviously, for most folks, that process of grieving and breakup isn't going to be at the same level, right, as if you lost someone in the real world. But it absolutely has parallels. The same emotions involved, the same processes involved. And so that is a real experience that a lot of people have had.
And Friends ended on a good note. Again, spoiler alert for people who haven't seen it. But I think about like Grey's Anatomy when Patrick, I can't think of his name. Dempsey. Oh my gosh. Patrick Dempsey passed away.
Yes.
Like that was a serious situation where many people were mourning the loss of this character.
Yes. So I wrote an entire paper that took a deep dive into people's, thank you for the lead up.
Yes.
Into people's reactions.
That was not planned, by the way.
Into people's reactions to the death of Dr. Derek Shepherd on Grey's Anatomy.
Yes.
Because it was something that was like, not entirely expected from the fan community. And so what I took a look at was people's social media posts immediately after. So I captured anything that had like that hashtag of it was McDreamy is McDead was the hashtag that a lot of people were using. That ended up being the title of the paper, McDreamy is McDead. And ultimately then did a qualitative analysis of what people were reporting. And it was really fascinating. People were so angry, just so mad. They used heartbreak emojis, so sad, so heartbroken. And there was a lot of folks who even reported disruption to their lives, like students saying, I cannot take a test today. I am just too upset. Or people saying like, I cannot focus at work today because I am just so sad, right? And so again, that television show had already been at that point on the air for over a decade. This was a character that they had formed this bond with. They had watched him fall in love and get married and have children. And then the showrunners decided to kill the character off, and incidentally, in a way, that was not befitting of the character. And so that was part of the anger, was that they felt that it was not doing justice to the character that they loved so much. So I think that's where a lot of the anger came from. But lots of heartbreak, lots of people talking about how they had to cope, and coping mechanisms was another theme. People talking about like, I need a glass of wine and I need a meal and I need those things that give me comfort, because it was mentioned a lot by people on social media. So yeah, it's really interesting.
It's so interesting. And we don't, like we said before, like sometimes when we get invested, whether it's on the surface level or a deeper level, like that situation, we might not realize it because it happens over time, or we're kind of taken away into a different world. Now, how would you recommend, based on the research that you've done, how would you recommend we consume media moving forward when it comes to romantic relationships?
So I always recommend that individuals should be critical consumers, that you shouldn't be passive when it comes to what you're watching. But I want to say that I think a lot of times the underlying assumption with questions like that, and I get questions like that a lot, is that there's some sort of harm in these kinds of stories. And I think where that stems from is this idea that media, especially romance media, is really unrealistic. And I think we can all agree that it is, in fact, really unrealistic.
Yes.
That is just the truth of the matter. But unrealistic isn't bad. And I think that a lot of times people think, oh, well, you probably shouldn't be watching this, or you probably shouldn't expose young people to this because it's setting them up for unrealistic expectations. But the truth is, there are some unrealistic expectations that aren't beneficial. A great example of that is there's a lot of media that would encourage the notion that your partner should just know what you're thinking. Like, you shouldn't have to say things. They should just know, right? We call that mind reading as expected.
That is wrong.
That's not helpful, right? Because it's literally impossible. Your partner cannot, in fact, read your mind.
Yes.
They are not a superhero. And so that's not great, right? But that is not the major theme of romance media. Right. The major theme of romance media, on the whole, of course there are exceptions, is that love conquers all. That despite whatever obstacles that the couple faces or challenges throughout a movie, especially, is a great example. Romantic comedies always have this kind of plot. That in the end, because there's love, everything's okay. And on the surface, you go like, no, right? Like, relationships take work, and that's absolutely true, right? And things don't just happen, right? Like, you have to put in effort. And all of that's accurate. However, research shows that the belief that love conquers all is actually beneficial for folks in relationships, whether we're talking about young people or we're talking about individuals in long-term established committed relationships. Research shows that that belief has a positive impact on their relationship satisfaction. And so you'd go like, but how?
Right.
Because how does your real life relationship in any way sort of meet that, right? Yeah. And the answer lies in the importance of positivity in relationships. And we know this based on a myriad of angles of research, that positivity is really key. That if in your interactions with your partner, you want your positive interactions to outweigh the negative. You want your positive words to outweigh your negative words. If they don't, that signals relationship trouble. That is one example. Another example would just be that when we're confronted with partners' behaviors that maybe we don't like, that happens sometimes, right? We have multiple ways of interpreting that, of responding to that, right? And if you have this sort of core belief that, you know what, if we have love, that can overcome all obstacles, you're more likely to choose the positive. You're more likely to go, you know, they probably didn't mean it that way. You're more likely to go, oh, well, maybe their behavior was because of outside circumstances and not because they're a bad person or whatever that might be. Now, I'm not advocating for making excuses for everyone's bad behavior.
Yes.
But again, research shows that having this sort of like global positive mindset actually trickles down into being more positive in relationships, and for that reason, having better quality, longer lasting relationships that are satisfying. And so that was a really long answer for a question that had to do with what do we need to do as consumers?
Yeah.
And I think that if you're interested in romance media, great. We watch that because it makes us feel good. Sometimes life can be challenging, it can be difficult, and if you need something to kind of like provide that comfort and warmth, great, do that. And if you're in the, you know, picking up along the way this message that love can in fact be powerful and can in fact overcome obstacles, thinking that way might actually not be so bad.
And that goes for someone at any stage of life, right? Like we talk about little kids. Just the other day, I was watching a movie where a 16-year-old falls in love with the prince that she saves out of the water. You'll probably know what I'm talking about if you know the movie. But like, that's what our kids are exposed to. And so some people might say, oh, they have what's the word I'm looking for? Like
idealized, maybe?
Yeah, an idealized form of what love should be. And then that's what they grew up thinking. But to your point, they're just looking at it as this is something that I enjoy and it's something to make me feel good.
Yeah, and I mean, there are obviously different ways that one can look at these sorts of stories and what they represent. And we can talk about other angles, right? But just as far as like the overall message regarding relationships, that piece of it, we don't really see that is particularly problematic, at least not in that regard.
Very, very interesting. It's so cool to look at it that way. Okay, we are going to go into our lightning round now just to get to know you a little bit more. So I'll have Tom start the clock. A lot of people go over, so it's okay if you go over, but we try to get all the questions in. Okay, here we go. So which rom-com would you watch on repeat?
I would watch on repeat 10 Things I Hate About You.
Oh, that's a good one. Okay, then from that, keep that in mind. What's your all-time favorite TV or movie couple?
Oh, no one in that movie. So, I mean, I'm going to just go with Derek and Meredith. I know we already talked about Grey's Anatomy, but like, and there was a lot of problems with that relationship.
Yes.
But I will go with them.
Okay, good choice. The first app that you would recommend deleting if you or someone wanted to cut out relationship drama?
Oh, probably Instagram, because there is just a lot of like couple goals type accounts on there that encourage a lot of comparisons.
Yes, too many. Favorite season on campus?
Fall.
Right
Favorite
now.
season everywhere. Definitely favorite season here.
Especially in Wisconsin. If you would have a superpower, what would it be?
If I had a superpower, it would be doing multitasking 5 million things at once.
Spoken like a true teacher. Okay, we are going to switch over to our Bible verse of the episode. This one I think people can interpret in a number of different ways, but I'm really curious to see what you say. So it's Romans chapter 12, verse 2. It reads, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." How does that resonate with you?
Oh, I didn't know we had this part of the episode. That absolutely resonates with me, especially when we're talking about this sort of cultural aspects of media, right? So we've been talking about relationships and media, but we're these days just so inundated. I think so many of us spend a lot of time with social media platforms, whether that's Facebook or Instagram or TikTok, and you don't realize even just how long you've spent on it so many times. I was talking to students about this just yesterday, that it can be so easy to just like scroll and not stop and say like, what messages am I really consuming here? Because really, you are taking all of that in, even if it's just 30 seconds at a time. And the algorithm is serving you things like what you've already watched and things that are consistent with what you already think. That's how they get you down that path. And so I think it's this verse is a good encouragement to stop and to think about that and to say, is what I'm consuming really consistent with my beliefs? If that's a belief in Jesus, a belief in God, is what I'm taking inconsistent with that? If it's a different belief system, same question, right? Is what I'm taking in really consistent with that or not? Because it's having an influence on you, whether you are just quick, you think it's just quick hits or not.
Right.
It really is.
Yep. And it hits you in different stages of life too, whether you're a college student, whether you are getting married, having a baby, in retirement, like anything, like it can have such a big influence on you. And it's good to step aside and just think about that.
100%. The difference when we talk about different life stages, different generations, is just which platforms we're using.
Sure.
Even folks who we don't traditionally think as heavy social media users, a little bit older, they're just using different platforms. It's not that they're not using social media. They tend to be using social media as well, just they're using Facebook, whereas our students are largely using TikTok, right? So different platforms, but nonetheless, similar sort of processes, similar sort of content available, and all of that. So yes, it applies to absolutely everyone.
Wonderful. Thank you for that inspiration. Seriously. What questions do you look forward to in the future for researching? You kind of hinted at one that you're thinking about. Anything else that you have on the docket?
Yes. So there's a study that I published, again, with my primary collaborator, Dr. Veronica Hefner. She and I looked at social comparison in the context of romance media, specifically romantic comedies. And the thought process was that people might watch these sort of films and feel like their relationships don't measure up. And a lot of scholars have said that they thought that that's the case, that, okay, you watch this big romantic gesture. Certainly a long-term relationship doesn't have that much excitement in it anymore. They can have excitement, but that your daily life, it just doesn't look like that. And so that it would make you feel worse was the hypothesis. Absolutely not true. So we did this study and we found, in fact, that that the women in the study were not comparing their romantic lives to these romantic movies, probably because they know they're unrealistic.
Yeah.
And on the contrary, they were reporting really positive feelings after watching the ending of a romantic movie. And so I'm really looking forward to following up on that. That experiment that we published is great, but it was just one study. it used just the endings of movies. So they only watched a few minutes of a clip of a movie. They didn't watch a whole movie.
Okay.
And so I'm looking forward to following up on that and seeing if that does really hold true. I think it probably will. The experiment was really robust, but I look forward to following up on that study for sure.
I'm looking forward to hearing about it, because that further emphasizes the point that we just talked about too. If listeners can remember anything based on this conversation, maybe more specifically your new book, what should they take away? If they can take away one main point, what should it be?
For sure. So the thing that people ask me the most when they find out that I'm a scholar of romantic relationships and media is our media good or bad for relationships? And the answer is it depends. So I wish I could tell you like, yes, this is good, this is bad. The reality is it's not that simple, that you do need to be a critical consumer, but not just in terms of the content that you're exposed to, not even just in terms of the medium that you're using, whether that's television or TikTok, but also the context. Are you watching together with your partner? Is that something you're doing jointly, spending time together, talking, using that as a launching point for conversation? Or is it doing that on your own and spending a whole day by yourself? And maybe sometimes that's okay too. But critically evaluating those things, being cognizant of those things is really important. So the major takeaway is that whether it's technology or entertainment, neither is straightforward, this is good, this is bad. We have to think of this in terms of all kinds of factors, and we should be critically evaluating those in our own lives.
Thank you for that. Now, your students are lucky enough to already be reading your book, but if someone listening or watching wants to get a hold of your book, how should they go about doing that?
So it is available through the Mulva Library. So
Okay.
if you have a ID for the Mulva Library, you can definitely get it there. Otherwise, it's available on Amazon. So
Okay.
you can get a digital or hard copy on Amazon.
And if they want to connect with you, what's the best way?
Best way to connect with me is my email or my domain, drkretz.night.domains.
Wonderful. Anything else that you want to add?
I don't think so.
Okay, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. This was very insightful, and I hope people take away a lot from it.
I hope so too.
Thank you.